Pretty straightforward. I'm going to make some educated guesses about which abilities Helminth will subsume in the upcoming Heart of Deimos update. Let me explain what subsuming a frame will do if you aren't familiar. We're watching a clip of Tenno live right now, and basically there's soon going to be a feature where this thing in the back of your ship can eat a frame you own, which destroys it, and then this thing permanently gains the ability to give one of that frame's powers to other frames. You can't swap more than one power into a given frame's kit, but that still means that every frame is gaining over 40 new potential abilities, and you can pick any one of those that you like and swap it in wherever you want. There's some other aspects to that system. You can look it up yourself if you want to hear about them. You have to feed it to be able to have it eat frames and give their abilities up. Don't worry about that stuff though. This time we're just going to speculate on which ability every frame is going to give. I'll let that demo run in the background as a visual aid. Toward the end of the week this video comes out, we'll find out which Warframe power each frame is able to give on the dev workshop on the forums, but I thought it would be fun to guess and check how close I get. I also think this video could be useful for farming extra copies of frames ahead of time, so yeah, as I go through I'll mention a few that seem like safe choices to me and which are easy to acquire. Alright, here are the rules. This is how we can make educated guesses. Every frame gives only one set ability. You don't choose which ability is subsumed. For example, the example we're being shown right now, feeding your Helminth a mag gives it the ability to give your frames pull, period. You can't pick another of mag's abilities. You always give up pull. And you can do it as many times as you want. Once you've fed Helminth a mag, you can give frames pull forever. We've been told that no signature abilities are being shared. You can define that a few different ways, and I will be throughout this video. You will be able to use augments for abilities you've shared. That's pretty important, pretty powerful. Some frames don't have any abilities that are completely unconnected from their kits, and in those cases we've been told that they're going to have to fudge it a little bit, but that also means where possible, the goal is to stay close to an ability's original function, so there will only be new abilities where necessary, and I'm going to assume that those new abilities will still be similar to one of that frame's existing abilities. Again, there'll be examples along the way and I'll point them out. Not many current abilities are perfect. You know, there are a lot of abilities that are not so great. Lots of abilities are great, lots of them aren't. And we've heard recently that we're going to be getting buffs to many abilities across all frames before this system comes out, which means quite a few of the abilities I'm going to guess will probably be buffed, but that's another video. As a quick aside, that's awesome. I was concerned that it would be really boring to choose which ability to swap out on a handful of frames because one or two of their abilities are just bad, and this will help with that. Finally, there was some confusion about prime frames. Obviously, you can give prime frames these abilities with this system. It would make no sense if you couldn't. You simply can't feed Helminth prime frames. You need to get the non-prime version of a frame to subsume it and give Helminth the ability to grant its designated ability. So, okay, let's guess what those abilities will be. Behold! Speculation, the most underwhelming, because we're just going to go to the arsenal for the rest of the video. Let's begin in alphabetical order with Ash. I think that Ash is probably going to give either Smokescreen or Teleport. Maybe Shuriken. I feel like Shuriken is powerful with its augment, but it feels like a fairly ashy ability. I guess we're all ninjas. But I do think throwing shurikens feels a little... Things that have art assets related to the frame, that feels like a certain kind of signature ability. And then obviously not Bladestorm. Smokescreen, I don't know, like Stealth is certainly a signature ability too. Teleport feels like the least Ash ability. It's also pretty bad. The augment does a finisher automatically and restores energy, but you can already do a finisher when you teleport to an enemy. They are open to finishers, so the augment kind of doesn't do anything. You can already do a finisher, and it already costs very little energy. The augment just does the finisher for you and makes it cost even less energy. So unfortunately, I don't think this one is too exciting. Probably Smokescreen or Teleport, maybe Shuriken. They're all abilities that would be okay, but not amazing on other frames. Shuriken with its augment is pretty solid. Not a lot to see here, I don't think. Atlas. Probably Tectonics, which is terrible, but Petrify would be really nice. So this is a just cone-shaped Petrify ability. Now again, Atlas is one of these. We've already run into one where a lot of these abilities interact with Rubble or with Atlas's other abilities. So clearly, even if Atlas gives one of them up, it's going to be slightly different simply because if you remove Tectonics from Atlas's kit, you don't have Petrify, and Petrifying Tectonics has an interaction with it. So we obviously that will change in some way. A lot of people talked about maybe these abilities will be nerfed when they're given to other frames. I'm not sure that will be necessary. I think a lot of abilities are just bad when they're not in the kit that they came from for various reasons. If you simply remove the synergies because they're not in the frame's kit anymore, a lot of abilities are already not so great. But who knows? We'll see. I think probably Petrify or Tectonics. However, Tectonics would also be slated for a buff, I would hope. Make it bigger. That sounds fun to me. Moving on to Banshee. Probably Silence. It could be Sonic Boom. Silence feels like a pretty signature Banshee ability, but I don't know. It's also sort of an innocuous ability. One other thing I was considering is maybe they'll avoid giving too many of these abilities that are just push in a cone, or that are Warframe first abilities that just do damage. Maybe they don't want a lot of overlap. That would make the system more fun if there wasn't as much overlap. So I feel like that's sort of the argument for Silence and its augment, which is pretty reasonable. It makes you do more finisher damage. Don't necessarily need more finisher damage, but it certainly makes sure enemies die, which is good, because if they don't, then as you're playing Banshee, you might be dead pretty soon. Sonic Boom is a pretty good augment that removes armor. Sonic Boom on its own is not a very good ability. Maybe it'll get buffed. I think I would guess Sonic Boom here. Next up, we have Baruch. I think this one is pretty challenging. Again, another frame where the abilities at least contextually change just by not being in Baruch's kit. For example, Elude is a pretty do-nothing ability, and it's made better by the fact that on Baruch, you're charging up Serene Storm. But if another frame had this ability, it would be like, what's the point, kind of. So who knows? Maybe you could channel another Warframe power while you're in it or something. Who knows? Maybe this will be really good. Personally, my guess would be Lull. I think that Elude and Desolate Hands are... So Desolate Hands is the art asset thing, but these are both really pacifist abilities, whereas Lull is similar to an ability that some other frames already have. So it forms less of Baruch's identity, I guess I would say it that way. Another way to look at this that people have discussed is maybe they're just going to always give bad abilities. Like, what's the frame's worst ability? It'll be that, to make balancing less crazy. But I don't know. I mean, I still think in many cases that would still be useful sometimes. I don't know. My final guess is Lull. I wouldn't be surprised to see Desolate Hands or maybe even Elude as well. But it would be a little weird. I feel like the least Baruch ability in here is Lull. Chroma. Yeah, I think Spectral Scream. This is another example of a Warframe where simply removing the ability from Chroma's kit immediately changes it because other frames don't have Chroma's passive. So they're not going to change the element of it. My guess would be it'll be Spectral Scream, and it'll just be locked to heat. It's just always heat. That seems like the simplest way to do it. I really can't see it being a lot of other things. Effigy is a really particularly signature fourth ability. And then Vex Armor and Elemental Ward are so iconic to Chroma, and they really rely... Well, not Vex Armor, I guess, but Elemental Ward really relies on that switching mechanic, whereas Spectral Scream is fairly minimally affected by it. Wouldn't it be something if they gave every frame Vex Armor? Anyway, so yeah, I think Spectral Scream, and they'll just limit it to heat. That would be my guess for Chroma. Ember, I think this one is rather challenging. Fireball or Fire Blast, I guess. Immolation has kind of a UI element. You get that heat gauge, and I think that kind of counts as a signature ability mechanically. Inferno is a pretty signature ability. So I feel like Fire Blast, you could. This ability mostly exists to interact with Immolation, though. So again, it's not so much that this ability... It would be worse if it wasn't on Ember, but it would also not really make that much sense as an ability. Like, this is about venting heat, you know? So I'm going to guess Fireball. Fireball's augment is pretty cool. You can add heat damage to stuff. It acts like a mod, so you can create new elemental combinations. I'd be down for... I'm not saying it would be bad if we shared Fireball. Although I'd be interested to see if base Fireball without an augment got buffed as well. Equinox. Again, almost every frame, there's some kind of roadblock where it's like you can't just give another frame these abilities, which is one of the reasons I find the system compelling, but it's also confusing. So for Equinox, my guess would be we're simply going to get one half of one of the abilities. Equinox's abilities are all two different abilities, and then you swap between them with Metamorphosis. So having it be Metamorphosis wouldn't make any sense. And then having both abilities, they could do that. They could just make it like hold, tap, or something like that. But I think what they're going to do is make it so we just get one of these abilities. So we get Rest or Rage or Pacify or Provoke. My guess would be probably Rest or Rage. I do think Rest is a pretty iconic Equinox thing from the player's perspective, but from a design standpoint, Rest is not, like, it's Pacify and Provoke and Mend and Maim that are Equinox's more signature abilities in my estimation, and these are just spells, you know, they're just abilities you can cast. So Rest or Rage, if I had to guess one, I would be interested to see if they would share Rage, and it will get buffed, perhaps. I could also maybe see Provoke, a type of ability that would be interesting to share. However, as we're going to talk about at the end of the video, one of the Helminth abilities were shown. Helminth has its own abilities that no Warframe has that you can also give to Warframes. One of the Helminth abilities is basically Provoke, so maybe that doesn't make sense. So my final guess would be Rage, and Rage will probably be buffed. Excalibur, definitely slash dash. Radial Javelin is a really funny one here, so I feel like you would think that it would be, like, this ability is not iconic to Excalibur at all because it's super redundant. I think this ability will probably get buffed, but I feel like it is signature to Excalibur. It's iconic to Excalibur, you know, from a not design perspective, not a mechanical perspective, not a metagame perspective, not even really a flavor perspective. Why Javelin? I think it's an ability that makes you think Excalibur so much, you know? Maybe, I guess slash dash is like that too. It's Excalibur. All the abilities are like that. My guess is slash dash. Radial Javelin would not surprise me. It'll probably be Radial Javelin. I'm switching my guess to Radial Javelin. Frost. We had it confirmed that Frost is giving Ice Wave. There are like 6 or 7 Warframes where we've just already been told what ability they're giving. Frost is giving Ice Wave. Gara. Yeah, this is a funny one, isn't it? Again, these abilities sort of change in the context of not being in Gara's kit because they're all about shattering glass or holding shattered glass or making glass to shatter. I think probably Spectra Rage is the least connected ability, but it's a pretty Gara ability from a flavor perspective, you know? The augment for this is pretty decent, so it'd be interesting to have it shared. This ability also might get buffed. I guess Shattered Lash would sort of make sense. Like, it would still be an ability outside of her kit. It would just, I don't know how much you'd really, yeah. I'm going to guess Spectral Rage. Another thing here is you can kind of decide for yourself whether you think they're going to go for a variety or whether they're going to mostly do abilities that are similar, or again, are they going to go out of their way to make many of the shared abilities similar or different? Hard to say. You could take that a lot of ways. For Garuda, I think it's going to be Blood Altar. I feel like Dreadmere is full of art assets, very distinct Garuda-y ability, and then obviously Seeking Talons and Bloodletting are the definition of a signature ability. So I feel like Blood Altar is sort of just the only option here. I'm going to guess Blood Altar. Might not be bad, gives every frame a very long range lunge and also a healing option. Guss, yet another where every ability changes outside the context of Gauss's kit. I think the ability that changes the least and relies the least on Gauss's redline meter is Thermal Sunder. You could probably just give other frames Thermal Sunder. This is an ability that without the restriction, or like without being in the context of the redline gauge, I would be interested to see if this ability is kind of too good in a way. But who knows? I think it's Thermal Sunder. I don't see how it can be anything else. So Thermal Sunder, and it just won't interact. There won't be a redline gauge. Maybe there'll be a cost change to the ability's energy. Grendel. Yeah, Grendel. Speaking of frames that all their abilities are connected, the only ability that doesn't rely on the other abilities is Feast. Or should I say, Nourish, Regurgitate, and Pulverize all don't work if you don't have Feast. So the only ability that you even could just give to other frames is Feast. Even then, I feel like outside the context of Grendel's kit, maybe it doesn't make that much sense. You can eat enemies, have them decay in your stomach, and then throw them up. I do think this would be a good ability if this is the ability that Grendel shares, but this might be one where we get something new. Maybe we'll get like Nourish and you don't need an enemy in your stomach, but it's more energy, or I don't know, something like a mini version of Pulverize. I don't think so. I think we're probably going to get Feast. My final guess would be Feast and not a new ability. But I wouldn't be surprised if it was something different. Harrow, oh boy. Yeah, definitely Condemn. Art asset signature abilities, where he uses his Thurible for Penance and Thurible, and then Covenant, again, like the definition of a signature ability. I think Condemn is the only option, despite the fact that it too, at least when Harrow does it, uses a Thurible, and has a bunch of chains that make you think Harrow when you use it. They're simply, I just can't imagine. I mean, these abilities would be insane to share. Condemn is pretty good too. It gives you a lot of overshields. If this is what Harrow shares, I'm looking forward to it. Hildren. Yep, they keep coming. Makes you notice how interconnected frames are, huh? Yeah, probably Haven. So Balefire is an exalted weapon. I'm going to assume that we just can't share exalted weapons. Aegis Storm is, again, like definition of a signature ability. And Pillage is pretty powerful. This healing Hildren's health, which is her shields, as well as restoring her energy, which is also her shields, obviously is part of the context of why it's really good. So maybe on other frames this wouldn't be that powerful, but I don't know. I still feel this still feels like a shield manipulation ability, which I suppose Haven is as well. I guess Pillage or Haven. I don't know. I'm kind of talking myself into it being Pillage, because Haven is more of a I'm literally just channeling shields to enemies, whereas Pillage is more of an innocuous, like, generic spell, you know? So I'm actually going to guess Pillage. In my notes, I guessed Haven, but I'm swapping it to Pillage. Hydroid. Tidal Surge, I guess. Undertow feels very signature. Tempest Barrage and Tentacle Swarm are very Hydroid-y abilities. I guess I could see Tempest Barrage. I think it'd be a little weird. I think Tidal Surge is while also a very Hydroid-y ability, something that could be shared. This ability is also pretty lackluster. Its augment is okay, it's not amazing. It gives you status immunity, and that also gives you knockdown immunity, which also gives you self-stagger immunity. It's currently bugged in this weird way, where if you activate it and then you refresh the duration, you can refresh the duration, but that breaks the augment until the duration ends. So it works, but then if you refresh it instead of letting it run out, then it doesn't work until it runs out, which is a weird bug. But anyway, I'm sure that'll be fixed, it's not half bad. It's not amazing. The damage on this is not good. The movement is useful. Again, this ability could see buffs. I'm going to guess Tidal Surge. Some double Hydroids. Inaros. Oh boy. I mean, like Desiccation, they're all sandy abilities. I feel like Desiccation is the only option here. Maybe Sandstorm. I really hope Devour and Sandstorm get some buffs. Inaros, it's funny. Despite what you might say about Inaros' abilities, I feel like I can't see these abilities not being on Inaros, you know? I'm going to guess Desiccation. Ivara. Yeah, another weird one. So Quiver is a selecting an option ability. It doesn't really have a UI element exactly. I mean, it does, but the point is that it's more of a, like, you just cycle through the abilities. Like, maybe that's okay. I'm going to assume it isn't, and that this is a signature ability. Prowl also strikes me as a very Ivara thing. And then obviously Artemis Bow is an exalted weapon. So I guess Navigator by default, but it's still pretty weird. Navigator is pretty niche, but when it's good, it's pretty good. So I don't know. I'm going to guess Navigator. Korra. Ensnare. This is a pseudo-exalted weapon. Venari is a companion, and this ability manipulates the companion. And then Strangledome. So yeah, I think Ensnare by process of elimination. This is a fairly good ability, groups enemies together effectively. It is a little bit better in the context of having abilities that are good when enemies are grouped together, but other frames have abilities that are good when things are grouped together, so it should be fine. I'm going to guess Ensnare. Limbo. Yep, this is another one of those. So while technically you could have Limbo's abilities on their own, obviously Rift Surge and Stasis require you to have other abilities that put enemies in the Rift. If you don't have Cataclysm and or Banish, then these abilities don't make sense. So not Cataclysm. And then, so it's Banish, right? Yeah, so the concern here, I think, is that the enemies are kind of just there and you can't really do anything to them. Like, if you can't go into the Rift after them, then isn't it kind of weird to be able to banish them, you know? Limbo is playing with which plane of reality he and the enemies are on, and Banish doesn't do that on its own. Limbo's ability to dodge and move in and out of the rift is what allows that to happen. Limbo's abilities are fine in the context of his kit, but I don't think you can just give banish to another frame. So this is one where I don't really see a way out. I'm going to predict that this will be an entirely new ability, and unlike a lot of other cases where I think there will be a new ability, I have no idea what this one is going to be. Maybe it'll be like a targeted knockdown, like it's like this, but there's no rift. That sounds a little boring, but maybe that's what'll happen. It'd be interesting if it kept the augment. Banish has an augment where you can banish allies and they get healed based on your strength. It starts at 25%, so it can be a pretty substantial heal. That can be sort of interesting. Again, we want abilities that are good without their augments, though. Loki. Switch teleport, I guess. Also, this ability does almost nothing. It has an augment that makes your swap target invulnerable if it's an ally, but that's almost more trolling if you do it to your squad mates. So yeah, I don't know. Loki has a lot of abilities that maybe haven't aged the best. So maybe Switch Teleport will get some changes, and then it'll be that. Decoy feels like a signature ability. Maybe I'm over-biasing against Stealth, and it could be Invisibility or Ash's Smoke Bomb, for example. I don't think it could be Decoy. It's obviously not Radial Disarm. Switch Teleport, but it will be changed. I guess I'm going to guess that. But I might be over-biasing against invisibility abilities being shared. Mag is confirmed to give Pull. Pull has an augment. I don't think it's that great. Some people are excited about it. Mesa. We talk about Mesa being really powerful, but these two abilities are not very good. This ability has a damage cap, and this ability gives damage, which looks good, but it's base damage, so it's additive with both the bonus that Peacemaker already gives you and with Hornet Strike. So the actual amount of increased damage this is giving you overall is quite low, despite how reasonable it looks. And then, it breaks enemies' guns. I've got a lot of suggestions about what to do about these abilities, but for now, I guess Ballistic Battery feels like a very shareable ability, something that you could easily give up to other frames. I sort of think Shatter Shield, this would be really powerful, so maybe that's a reason not to share it, but it doesn't feel like I don't understand why Mesa has this ability. I guess she's not easy to shoot because she's a gunslinger or something. I don't know. I guess if I had to choose one thing, I think probably Shooting Gallery. I think this is a good compromise of not being very powerful, and even if they buffed it, I think it would still be like a pretty balanced ability. I have various ideas for how to buff it. And this is also it's sort of a Mesa-like ability. I like this ability flavorful wise, but I don't know. My guess is Shooting Gallery. I think this is a hard one. I'm afraid it's going to be Ballistic Battery, but again, very likely this ability would get some changes too. Mirage. I think there's kind of no way it's not Sleight of Hand, which I think is weird. Mirage has this thing where you have light and dark, which she can't reliably generate. My change for Mirage would be let her make light and dark. I think Hall of Mirrors is way too signature, Prism is way too signature, and then Eclipse is light and dark, which is a pretty signature thing to Mirage. So I guess it's Sleight of Hand. I feel like giving other frames the Augment Explosive Ledger main is going to be really good for some game modes. There are frames that are already good at killing waves after waves of enemies, and this would make them even better at doing that. So that could actually be a surprisingly significant ability to share. But yeah, I don't know. That's kind of a weird one to me. Nekros. We have it confirmed that it's not Desecrate, but I don't really think we needed that confirmed. It's clearly not Shadows of the Dead. And then, I don't know, I mean, Terrify is the ability is called Terrify, are they really going to give that up? Soul Punch, it's called Soul Punch. Same argument kind of goes there. So yeah, I don't know. I guess my final guess would be Terrify. I think this is a more unique ability. I feel like these are both equally necrosy. Like, you could argue they are, you could argue they aren't. They both have augments that are okay. This one is a revive when you target someone, which could be pretty cool to share. But the base ability is kind of this is an okay CC ability. I'm going to guess Terrify. Neja. So this one is confirmed to be Firewalker. I was just kidding. Every single time I go up to a frame, I've been saying, because I do the beginning of these off script and then I transition into my final guesses so that they're more organic and you can hear my thoughts changing. I've changed my mind on like 3 or 4 guesses so far. But yeah, this one is confirmed to be Firewalker. They told us it's Firewalker. By the way, Firewalker doesn't make you slidey, and it is not affected by strength. I've heard a lot of people say people are going to be so fast when they give Firewalker to other frames. It will not meaningfully change your speed. You probably won't even notice. If you give Firewalker to Volt, you won't even notice the speed difference. However, Firewalker is a pretty good ability with a pretty reasonable augment. So dance around objectives, and you can create a lot of crowd control, and then accumulate it for big damage with the augment. Nidus. I think the only ability here that you can share without changes is Larva. So Virulence, you could give and then not have it give mutation stacks. These abilities take mutation stacks. I think these abilities without mutation stacks would be way too strong, fact aside that they are pretty signature abilities to Nidus. The Larva feels like it's the least connected to that economy, and it is a reasonably not Nidus-y ability in the grand scheme of things, despite making a gigantic infested blob. I think Virulence is almost equally likely, except that it gives mutation stacks, and so maybe that makes it a less obvious candidate. Probably Larva. Larva is probably pretty decent to give to a lot of frames. That sounds pretty powerful. Nova. It could be Wormhole. That would be powerful in some situations. And it could be Antimatter Drop. I feel like Nullstar seems a little overwhelming. Another weird corner case here is that Nullstar has an augment that interacts with other abilities in Nova's kit. So maybe they won't share it because of that. That's kind of weird. You could just be unable to equip it. They could just let you equip it and it doesn't do anything. It's possible that it doesn't matter, but it occurred to me that maybe that's a reason not to. I'm going to guess Antimatter Drop. I think that it's interesting because this maybe is like a pretty thematically signature ability for Nova. I hope it's come clear that a signature ability kind of probably does not mean an ability that is flavorful, because there are a lot of cases where it seems way more important to not give up a mechanically signature ability, you know? So I'm going to guess Antimatter Drop, which might be fine. I'd kind of like to see Antimatter Drop get buffed. Maybe it's okay. Nyx. I think a lot of these abilities would be pretty powerful to give up. It'll probably be Mind Control. It could be Psychic Bolts. I know a lot of people want that. Psychic Bolts is really good. It removes lots of enemy armor, can easily remove all enemy armor, and it hits a lot of enemies at once, costs very little energy. It's good, but I don't think she's going to give that up. I think it's probably going to be Mind Control. Is that more of a flavorfully signature ability? Yes, but I do think there's enough abilities that are going to be shared that are like fire bolts of some kind, you know, or like remove enemy armor with an augment or without an augment in this case. That maybe for variety we'd avoid that. I wouldn't look at you funny if you said you think it'll be Psychic Bolts, but I don't. I'm going to guess Mind Control. Oberon. Smite. I think by process of elimination it has to be Smite. Not Reckoning, and then Renewal and Hallowed Ground interact quite closely with each other. Reckoning and Hallowed Ground also interact. So not Hallowed Ground. And I think that Renewal and Reckoning are fairly not tightly interwoven. It's not like they don't do anything if you don't have Hallowed Ground, but I do think they're connected enough to Oberon's kit that I don't see why it wouldn't be Smite. In fact, plenty of people have agreed with me on this, and that's why Oberon is probably my #1 recommendation for a frame to go get ahead of time. Smite is an augment that gives you radiation. You just add radiation to your weapons and your allies' weapons, and it's modded by strength, and it's a lot. That's pretty powerful, and because Oberon is, at least by my estimation, almost guaranteed to give Smite with its augment, and Oberon is extremely easy to acquire another copy of, for many established players, you already have all the blueprints for Oberon just sitting around. You can just go build an Oberon right now. I feel like this is one of the best future-proofing ones. If you have Oberon parts, just go build one right now. I think that it's a very safe bet. Even if Oberon does not give Smite, these abilities are pretty good. So I think Oberon is a great choice. If there was one frame, only one frame that I would recommend getting ahead of time to prepare, it would be Oberon. If you're a new player and you don't have Oberon yet, you will accumulate Oberon parts over time, but I might even go so far as to say you would consider being ready to donate Oberon based on what ability. I think Smite with its augment is maybe not that good if you don't have a lot of mods, but these abilities are very good if you don't have a lot of mods. So if it isn't Smite, I think I would even recommend Oberon for newer players to go get and get ready to give up. I think Oberon is a good all-around choice for everyone in a lot of ways. Octavia. Here's another one where there's sort of a weird consequence. A lot of people have sort of pre-assumed that we're not going to get a Warframe 4th ability. When we were hearing them describe what abilities we won't get, like signature abilities, there was this moment where we were told it wasn't going to be Warframe Ultimates or 4th abilities, but it was kind of unclear based on the wording whether that means no, we mean signature abilities, or not signature abilities and not Warframe 4th abilities. As I've been going through, I feel like it doesn't make sense for basically any of the frames for them to give their 4th ability, except for Octavia. I think it does make a lot of sense. Mallet, Resonator, and Metronome are all very music-oriented and signature. If you don't have the Manticore, these abilities don't really make sense. The only ability that isn't connected to the Manticore directly is Amp. So looked at that way, I think it makes sense for it to be Amp. On the other hand, I could see Metronome just, you only have the default song, and you could get given that. I think Mallet and Resonator feel very signature to Octavia, but I don't know. This is one where, this is a really unique Warframe as well. This is not one of those frames where there are just some abilities that are their general powers in a game. This is a very thematically connected Warframe. It's not that the abilities have such tight synergy. Bluntly, I think they don't feel like they do when you actually play Octavia. But Octavia is very distinct from other frames. It's kind of like Limbo. It's a gameplay loop that you don't have unless you're playing Octavia, unless you're playing Limbo. So I'm going to guess Amp. Go ahead, disagree, slander me in the comments for my heinous crime of going out on a limb about this, but I'm going to say Amp. Protea. Yeah, so I don't think Dispensary. Temporal Anchor is the definition of a signature ability. And Blaze Artillery, I think it's going to be Grenade Fan. Is it okay to have a modal ability like this? I think it probably is. I want to say if we get Grenade Fan, this is one of the most powerful abilities in the entire game to just give to an arbitrary frame. Shield Satellites will restore overshields, and they regenerate them. So you basically just get an automatic 1200 health pool because your overshield pool is static. Every frame has 1200 overshields, except for the ones that don't, but you know. And so this would be extraordinarily powerful to give to other frames. That is why I think it will be Blaze Artillery. But it's interesting because Protea's abilities use like parts of her model. So you take this turret off of Protea's butt, you know, and then Dispensary as well. And so does that mean it'll be Grenade Fan? I don't know. I'm going to guess Blaze Artillery here, but I think this is one of those where it's like if you come to the logical conclusion, it contradicts itself. There's a reason it shouldn't be this, and there's a reason it shouldn't be this. I guess, well, the reason it shouldn't be this is a power or balance related reason. It's probably going to be Grenade Fan. I'll guess Grenade Fan. But I think that will be very, very powerful, almost potentially in a bad way. Revenant. No. And then, yeah, these abilities are kind of connected. So they could be slightly modified. I think Enthrall on its own is a pretty simple ability, and it's just how it connects to Mesmerskin and Reeve that's complicated. So maybe Enthrall makes the most sense. I guess I'll guess Enthrall, but I'm not sure. Also note how this and Mind Control, outside the context of the frames kits, are pretty similar. So I don't know, maybe that's not okay, but I'm gonna guess Enthrall. Maybe I should go back and change my guess about Nyx to Psychic Bolts. Rhino. I think it has to be rhinocharge, but I think this is a hilarious one because the ability is called rhinocharge. Like, does it become called volt charge if you swap it onto volt? Like, these abilities, Rhino Stomp, okay, yeah, they're not going to give you Iron Skin. And then Roar? No, right? They're not going to give you Roar. That would be extremely powerful. This is a separate damage multiplier. But yeah, and then that only leaves Rhinocharge. But the ability is called Rhinocharge. So I don't know what to tell you. I'm going to guess Rhinocharge, but I'm not sure. Maybe it would be funny if it did actually change based on whatever frame you give it to. Saren. Saren is confirmed to give Molt. A lot of people don't know this even after all this time, but Molt gives the same speed increase as Volt's speed ability. Yes, this ability makes you run really fast, really fast as Volt does. Giving this ability to any frame will make them very, very fast. Does that really matter that much in normal gameplay? No. This does have an augment that gives you health regeneration. I think that's a bit overrated. It's pretty easy to get health regeneration kind of for free elsewhere in your loadout. Melee in particular, there are a lot of mods that give you health regeneration, but there are a lot of mods you might like to run in that place. So if you view it as, oh, you can swap out a mod on your Warframe by using the augment for molt that heals you, to gain a mod slot on your melee weapon by not using a healing mod on your melee weapon, I guess that's a decent value proposition. Anyway, this one is confirmed to be molt, but I wanted to note how some people might think that sounds kind of bad, and it's totally not. The augment is kind of relevant on a lot of frames, and this ability does make you go really fast, which will matter sometimes. I wonder who would care about that. Titania. Yeah, I mean spellbind or lantern, like I guess spellbind. I have always been a little annoyed because I feel like Lantern and Spellbind are almost the same ability. It doesn't really make that much sense to me to have one frame have both of these abilities. They're both good, but they're why both, you know? They're both basically crowd control and area, and just in slightly different ways. Yeah, I guess I would guess Spellbind. It'd be kind of interesting if it was Lantern, but that does feel like a more Titania-like ability. Trinity. Yeah, search me. Well of Life is an ability we heard is confirmed to be getting a rework or a rebalance of some kind. And that would be the ability I would guess. I can't really see it being Energy Vampire, Link, or Blessing. Maybe it could be Link. I don't see how it could possibly be Energy Vampire or Blessing. This is one of the frames where these abilities are every definition you could possibly construe of a signature ability, this ability is. Same thing for Blessing. It's a flavorful signature ability. It's a mechanical signature ability. The community thinks of it as a signature ability. I guess Link makes some sense here, or whatever Well of Life becomes. Let's guess whatever Well of Life becomes. Go out on a limb. Valkyr. Hysteria, no. Warcry, probably not. And then Ripline feels like a pretty signature ability. Paralysis is the remaining ability, and Paralysis is a little weird because... So Valkyr has very low shields. The idea here is that Valkyr shields are just a little mini resource for Paralysis. It costs very little energy, it's just shields. Valkyr doesn't really care about her shields. Other frames might, and so the context of this ability changes in a very different way from other abilities if other frames get it. Imagine Hildren with this ability. It's suddenly terrible because you lose a third of your shields every time you use it. So that's not necessarily a reason it can't be given to other frames. I just wanted to note that's kind of weird. I guess I'll guess Paralysis. The augment for this is a little bit okay. See note at Valkyr needing a rework. But yeah, Valkyr is at least powerful. If it's Warcry or something, that'll obviously be good. I just think that might be a bit boring. Vauban. So a couple of things here. You could consider whether Mind Layer will just give us one of them, or maybe all of them. I think it's more likely to be Tesla Nervers or Photon Strike. Photon Strike feels the least Vauban-y to me. It's still cool, don't get me wrong, but I feel like it's the ability that doesn't feel like balls, you know? All of Vauban's abilities are throwing balls, and Photon Strike feels the least like throwing balls. It seems like a decent... Like, if you're just going to give a Warframe a damage nuke ability, I feel like this is one of the ones that's actually good. So, I'm going to guess Photon Strike. I guess here's a Vauban build. Don't copy that. You're not going to do well with it. I don't know what it's for. We do need to revisit Vauban at some point. Volt is confirmed to give Shock. That's pretty good. Shock has an augment. I mean, Shock is a decent first ability anyway. It does okay damage at low levels. At medium levels, you can use it to stun enemies. It's a one-handed action, so you can do it while shooting. At higher levels, you can use it to give enemies an electricity proc to make Condition Overload more powerful. And it also is an augment that gives your weapons electricity, which can be built into more corrosive, or you could just get electricity alongside, say, viral, and then you have viral increasing damage, and then electricity is a damage over time effect. So very solid ability overall. Might not seem exciting, but it totally is. Very useful. I think, ironically, it's kind of less useful to Volt himself, but other frames could be potentially interested. Wisp. This ability seems too loaded to be given to other frames, and Soulgate, no matter how much people feel like this isn't connected to Wisp, I just don't see this ability being shared. It'd be kind of cool if it was, but I'm going to guess something like Breach Surge. I think Will-o'-the-Wisp is also too signature an ability. Firing out a Will-o'-Wisp feels too much like a thing that a frame named Wisp does. C note at rhinocharge, so I'm going to say Breach Surge. Pretty powerful ability, but not insane or anything. Wukong. There were some leaks that people have brought up a lot of times over the past week where it showed that Celestial Twin was the ability that was going to be shared. And right in that leak, or commented below that post on Twitter or whatever, our developer said that's not confirmed. It might be something else. I'm going to assume that means it isn't Celestial Twin. So not Primal Fury because it's an exalted weapon. So Cloudwalker or Defy. Yeah, I mean, it's probably going to be Cloudwalker, but yeah. I don't want to talk about this one for reasons that will remain unspoken. Zephyr. I forget if this was confirmed to be Airburst, but I'm pretty sure it is. And we also got it confirmed that Airburst is getting reworked. So I guess Airburst. Cool. This is not a good ability right now. It does almost nothing. This is one of the, if you had a list of how much abilities do, this ability does among the least of any Warframe ability in the game. But it's just like a very, very weak and projectile travel time version of Banshee's Sonic Boom. And then it has an interaction with tornadoes that also doesn't do very much. So I'm very interested to see what happens with this ability. I'm going to guess Airburst. Finally, I mentioned that we were shown some Helminth abilities. Let's try to find those Helminth abilities in the this. I know we saw them somewhere. We'll scrub back through. Here we are. So I jumped around and recorded what these abilities seemed to say they were, and I'm going to talk about them now. So we know Helminth has a few abilities of its own. If you're wondering what these are abilities that Helminth itself has. No frame has these already. These are not new abilities that, it's not like one of these is secretly the new ability that, Grendel will give or whatever. These are new abilities from Helminth that no frame has at base, but you can give to other frames. That being said, they're pretty neutral abilities. They don't really do anything flavorful necessarily. They're just generic effects that you might want. We know some of them, here they are, and we also were told that there are going to be more than these. So here are the ones we know. Again, I jumped around and scrolled through to see what they are when they were hovered over. Empower gives you strength on your next ability cast. So you use Empower and then you just get strength for your next ability. Whether that is affected by strength itself or not will probably determine how good that is or what base value it has. But yeah, it seems pretty cool. I like that because it means if you have an ability you like that you want to be powerful and you're not using some other ability, you can then make that slot in the Warframes kit an interesting choice by putting this in. Exactly the kind of effect that I would want from Helminth's own abilities rather than some specific frame. Infested Mobility, so this gives you a speed and parkour velocity buff. Speed buffs are a dime a dozen, and Saren is already sharing a really powerful one, but parkour velocity buffs are very, very uncommon. There are very few of those. So first of all, that would make that a way to go fast that is more robust than it currently is. And again, another ability where whether or not it is affected by strength will make a fairly big difference. Companion Heal does what it says it does. I think it teleports your companion to you as well or something, but it heals your companion. Rebuild Shields is also self-explanatory. Note that both of these abilities, they didn't say that they healed all of your pet's health or all of your shields, but it might be that they need to rank up or something, just like normal Warframe powers. You know how when a frame is at rank 0, the power is not at its full strength, but then over time it becomes its full strength. It's quite possible that these abilities will work the same way, so maybe Rebuild Shields at rank 3 does restore all your shields, but at rank 0 it said 25% or something, which again that could also be affected by strength, who knows. And then finally, you see there's an ability, you see on the top it says rank 2, and then there's a little thing that says next reward. That was scrolled over, and the next reward is a new ability that you can infuse, that you're unlocking more of Helminth's own abilities. That ability is called Perspicacity. Perspicacity basically means lockpickiness. Your next hack is automatic. That was what it said it did. However, it also listed a chance. It said 25%. So you have an ability that you click, and when you click that ability, the next time you hack within like a certain amount of time, you have a 25% chance that the hack is automatic. That seems terrible. So again, maybe it ranks up the chance to be guaranteed. Maybe it's affected by strength, but it's still terrible because you can just use the cipher. Now, you can't use the cipher in every game mode. I guess for people that are really, really, really bad at hacking, this is a nice choice. But I do like it when they want to create, I would kind of view this as an accessibility ability, and I really like it when they find creative ways to make those abilities relevant for everyone, but just maybe the reason the ability exists in the first place is for a certain type of player that is having trouble with hacking. Fair enough. No hatred for me. I understand how that might be difficult for some people. I have some rhythm and I find hacking easy enough, but I can get how it could be frustrating. And indeed, when I stream, it's frustrating for me because I'm distracted. So I get that, but I think it would be good if those abilities had a more fleshed out effect, so you don't just never ever care about them for the rest of eternity unless you are a very particular kind of player. It'd be cool if it gave you some overall bonuses, like the next hack is automatic and you get some major buff, like think Parazon mod buff, but something else, for using perspicacity to hack. So in other words, you get like bonus damage or something, I don't know, for a little while after successfully using the ability to hack. So then you want to use it that way. That could be cool. This ability also says to me something you can add to a frames kit if you want to focus on like spy missions or whatever. A lot of people do that. They only break out certain frames for certain types of missions. And so this is an ability that I like, that it kind of plays into that way of thinking about things. Anyway, I'm not going to talk any more about this currently kind of bad ability. There we are. I'm pretty excited for this system, as I hope you can sort of tell by the fact that I've been talking about it for, how long did this take? 45 minutes? That wasn't so bad for one take, right? I hope you enjoyed this, and I'm really looking forward to these new features. They're coming pretty soon. We were told Heart of Deimos is supposed to come out late August, so build some frames, keep them in your foundry ready to go, don't consume them all at once. You can only feed Helminth one frame at a time, so to save slots, you might as well just keep them all built in your foundry and not in your inventory, and then take them out one at a time and feed them. And then it takes like 24 hours or something, they said, for the frame to be eaten by Helminth. And so there we go. And then we'll feed the beast and get some new abilities and builds rolling. Thanks for listening.